My name is Damien Blackwell. For nearly 20 years, I walked a path that most people would consider dangerous, even forbidden, but I didn't just study the occult. I lived it. I believed God was a lie, a fabrication designed to control the weak, and I prided myself on knowing the truth. There was nothing that could shake me. I belonged to the darkness. Since my teenage years, I had immersed myself in Satanism. At first, it was rebellion. Then, it became power. Christianity seemed like a pathetic fraud. I looked at believers with contempt, weak-minded sheep following an invisible God. I was certain that Lucifer was the real liberator, the one who offered knowledge, freedom, and power. I had everything I wanted: influence, followers, and a reputation that made even other occultists respect me. I led rituals, I made pacts, I invoked spirits, and every time someone spoke to me about Jesus, I laughed in their face until the night I died. It started as just another night of indulgence, a private gathering with my closest disciples, a ritual that involved blood, symbols, and ancient chants. We were deep into it, surrounded by candlelight, thick smoke filling the air. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with the presence of something unseen. And then I did something different. I raised my hands and said, "If Jesus is real, let him prove it." I meant it as a mockery, a challenge. I had spent years ridiculing Christians, claiming their God was weak, that he had no power. So I dared him in front of everyone. I spat at the heavens and defied him to show me I was wrong. A few hours later, I got into my car, intoxicated, my mind hazy from the night's excess. I didn't care. I had driven like this before. I was untouchable. Nothing could happen to me. I remember the music blasting, the city lights blurring as I sped through the streets of Los Angeles, pushing the accelerator, feeling invincible. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding light. Not headlights, not street lights. Something else, something overwhelming. For a split second, time seemed to stop. My vision blurred, my body tensed, and I felt an indescribable force pressing against me. My chest tightened, my heart pounded, and then, impact. The world flipped. The sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, tires screeching against pavement. Pain shot through my body. My skull slammed against something hard. I could hear my own heartbeat slowing down. Then, nothing. A silence deeper than anything I had ever known. I tried to breathe, but there was no air. My limbs felt weightless. My body, it wasn't there anymore. That's when I realized I was no longer alive, and the nightmare had just begun. Darkness, not just the absence of light. This was something else. A void, a suffocating emptiness that pressed against me like invisible hands, crushing, consuming. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't even scream. I was falling. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe this was the final flickering of neurons as my brain shut down. But no, this was real. Too real. The further I fell, the heavier I felt, as if something was dragging me downward. The silence shattered. Screams, echoing, endless. Then I saw them, shapes emerging from the void, twisted figures writhing in agony. Their mouths were open in eternal wails, but there were no words, only suffering. Some reached out, desperate, their hollow eyes pleading for something. Help, salvation, escape. That's when I recognized them, the great teachers, the occultists, the men and women I had admired, followed, worshipped. They were here, and they were not ruling. They were rotting. Impossible, I whispered, though I had no voice. These were the people who had promised enlightenment, power, knowledge beyond human comprehension. Where were their thrones, their dominion? A sickening realization clawed at my mind. I had been lied to. A deep, guttural laughter rumbled through the abyss, shaking everything. A force so immense, so overwhelming, I felt my very soul tremble. Then, from the depths of that endless darkness, he appeared, Lucifer. His presence was suffocating, his form indescribable. He was not the beautiful, misunderstood angel I had always imagined, no tragic hero, no noble figure fighting against an unjust God. No, he was horror itself. His skin was charred, cracked, oozing darkness, like a living wound. His eyes, black voids that swallowed everything. His smile, wicked, jagged, unnatural, and he was looking right at me. "Damien," he whispered, his voice slithering through my mind like a disease. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I had spent years serving him, calling his name, pledging my loyalty. And now in his presence I felt like nothing, less than nothing. Still, I forced myself to speak. I served you." My words trembled. "I gave you everything." Lucifer's smile widened, his jagged teeth glistening in the dim hellish glow. "And I took everything. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he had given me power, influence, knowledge. But now, standing before him, I could see the truth. It had never been my power. It was always his. He had only lent it to me for a time. And now that I was here, he was taking it back." The shadows moved behind him. More figures emerged, creatures I had seen before. I had summoned them, called their names in rituals, drawn their sigils in blood. I thought they had answered because I had control over them. I was wrong. They had never been my allies. Now they circled me like starving wolves, their twisted limbs stretched, their gaping mouths dripping with hunger. Lucifer took a step forward. "You are not special, Damien," he whispered. "You never were." Then he raised his hand, and the demons pounced. I felt their claws sink into me, tearing, ripping, not flesh, but something deeper. My soul. Pain exploded through every part of me, worse than anything I had ever known. I screamed, but no sound came out. My entire existence was being shredded apart. This was it. This was forever. I had made my choice. I had rejected God. And now, there was no way out. The demons dragged me down deeper into the abyss. The screams of the damned grew louder. The heat intensified. My body, or whatever I had left, began to dissolve into the suffering. And just as the darkness was about to consume me completely, a light, blinding, piercing through the void. It was like a shockwave, an explosion of pure power that sent the demons recoiling, screeching in agony. Lucifer's grin vanished. His expression twisted into rage, his eyes burning with hatred. I felt it before I saw it. Him, a presence unlike anything I had ever known. A weight so overwhelming, so absolute, that even the darkness itself seemed to shrink in its wake. Lucifer staggered back. The demons howled. Then in a voice that shook the very foundation of hell, he spoke. "This one is mine." And everything changed. The very foundation of hell trembled. The darkness recoiled. The demons screeched, writhing in agony as the blinding light cut through them like fire. They weren't just afraid, they were powerless, and in the center of it all, he stood. At first, I couldn't see him. The radiance was overwhelming, more brilliant than anything I had ever known. It wasn't just light, it was authority. It was power so absolute, so undeniable, that everything in its presence had no choice but to submit, even Lucifer. For the first time, the Prince of Darkness wasn't smiling. His face twisted in rage, his form seething with an indescribable hatred. But he didn't move. He couldn't, because standing before him was someone greater. Then I saw him, Jesus. But he wasn't like the paintings I had mocked. He wasn't weak, fragile, or distant. He was glorious. His robes were white, so white they seemed to pulse with an inner radiance. His eyes saw everything. Not just my actions, but my thoughts, my soul, the very essence of who I was. And yet there was no hatred in them, no anger, only truth. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. After everything I had done, after all the times I had spat in his name, after the rituals, the blasphemy, the people I had led into darkness, how could he look at me like that? Lucifer's voice broke the silence, a twisted snarl, full of venom. He is mine. The air grew heavy. The demons, regaining their composure, lunged forward again, snarling, clawing, desperate to reclaim me, but Jesus simply raised his hand, and they stopped. Instantly, they didn't just hesitate, they froze. As if an invisible force had chained them to the ground, Lucifer growled, his form flickering, unstable. The king had spoken, and even he had to obey. Then Jesus turned to me, and he said my name. Damien. Just one word, but it shattered me, because in that single moment I felt something I had never felt before. Not fear, not power, not even awe. I felt love, undeserved, unimaginable, unstoppable. Tears burned my eyes. I didn't even know I could cry in this place, but I did. Because for the first time in my entire existence, I realized something so simple, so earth-shattering, that it crushed me from the inside out. He knew me. He had always known me, every moment of my life, every thought, every doubt, every sin, every time I had cursed his name, every time I had turned away, every time I had told others that he was nothing more than a myth. He had seen it all, and yet he was here. For me, Lucifer snarled, he doesn't want you, he chose me. Jesus didn't even look at him, he never spoke to him, because Lucifer was irrelevant. This moment, this choice, was between me and him, and then he showed me, not with words, not with judgment, with truth. In an instant, memories flooded my mind, flashes of my life, but not the ones I expected. I saw moments I had long forgotten. The times when he had tried to reach me, the Christian friend in high school who had told me about Jesus, the old woman who had prayed for me in the streets, the stranger who had handed me a Bible at a train station, the quiet moments when I was alone, when I had felt that strange tug in my heart but ignored it, the dreams I had dismissed, the doubts I had buried. He had always been there, calling me, pursuing me, and I had run from him every single time. Tears streamed down my face. The weight of it all crushed me, not in despair but in realization. I had never been abandoned. I had simply refused to listen. Jesus took a step closer. His voice was steady, unshaken, full of power. You were never mine, Damien, but you can be. I stared at him, my mind racing. I had spent my entire life believing a lie, devoting myself to a master who never cared for me, who saw me as nothing more than a tool, a soul to be claimed and discarded. Lucifer had promised power, freedom, truth, but Jesus was truth. Lucifer had demanded my soul. But Jesus, he was offering no chains, no force, no coercion, only a choice, Lucifer hissed. He's too far gone. He belongs to me. Jesus looked at me, waiting. His hand was open. I felt the darkness still, pulling, the weight of my past trying to drag me back. I thought of the rituals, the sacrifices, the people I had led astray. How could I be forgiven? How could he want me after everything? Then, his voice, soft but firm. I died for you too. A sob tore from my throat. I didn't deserve this, but I wanted it. I wanted him. Lucifer screamed, his form distorting, writhing in fury. The demons howled. The very walls of hell cracked and trembled, but it didn't matter, because I knew my choice. My voice trembled. Jesus. I reached for his hand, and the moment my fingers touched, his hell disappeared. The moment my fingers touched his, hell vanished. The suffocating darkness, the shrieking demons, the twisted grin of Lucifer, all of it was gone. In its place, light. Not just around me, but inside me, filling every part of my being. For the first time in my existence, I felt free. I wasn't falling anymore. I was rising. The presence of Jesus surrounded me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel his power, his love, his authority. It held me together, kept me from dissolving into nothingness. I thought I was going somewhere, maybe heaven, maybe a place where I could make up for my mistakes. But then I heard a voice. It wasn't divine. It wasn't from beyond. It was human. He's coming back. The world snapped into focus. A sharp, piercing pain shot through my chest. My lungs burned as they gasped for air. My body convulsed violently. Every nerve screamed in agony, as if I had been shocked back into existence. I wasn't in hell anymore. I was back. A blinding white light flickered above me. Hospital lights. The sound of beeping machines filled my ears. Shadows moved around. Me, voices shouting orders, doctors, nurses. I tried to move, but my body felt like dead weight. My mind was still trapped between two realities, what I had just seen and where I was now. One of the nurses leaned over me, eyes wide in disbelief. "We lost you for 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 7 minutes in hell. I wanted to speak, to scream, to tell them everything. But no words came out. My throat felt raw, as if I had been drowning, and in a way, I had. The hospital room blurred. The fluorescent lights, the movement of people, the distant hum of machines, it all felt unreal. Because I wasn't the same person anymore. I had gone somewhere no one was supposed to go, and I had seen the truth. Days passed, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the echoes of hell, the screams, the laughter of demons, Lucifer's voice. "You were never special. You were just prey." I couldn't escape it. I couldn't ignore it. I had spent years telling others that Jesus was a lie, that heaven and hell were just myths, that there was no afterlife, no consequence, no judgment. Now I knew the truth, and it was destroying me. The doctors said I was lucky, that surviving such a crash was a miracle. They had no idea. How right they were. I sat in my hospital bed, staring at my hands. They were shaking, not from pain but from fear, not of dying, of living. What was I supposed to do now? Go back to my old life? Pretend none of this had happened? Keep leading people into the very darkness I had just been pulled from? I couldn't, but if I told the truth, who would believe me? I was discharged 2 weeks later. Physically, I was recovering. Internally, I was wrecked. I avoided my old friends, my followers, the people I had once considered family. Something told me they would. No, and I was right. The first message came 3 days after I got home. An unknown number. "You saw something, didn't you?" I ignored it. The second message came that night. "They won't let you leave so easily." I felt my chest tighten. Who was watching me? Or rather, what? Then came the phone call, a voice I recognized instantly, someone from my inner circle. Someone who had been with me the night of the ritual. "You need to come back," he said, his tone cold, urgent. "We know what happened." I swallowed hard. "You don't know anything." A long silence. Then, "Lucifer doesn't lose his followers." The line went dead. My stomach twisted. I wasn't free. Not yet. The nightmares grew worse. Every night I saw them. The faces of the damned. The demons I had called upon in rituals. The shadow of Lucifer watching me, waiting. And then there was him. Jesus. He never spoke in the dreams. He just stood there. His presence, the only thing keeping the darkness from swallowing me whole. I woke up gasping for air, drenched in sweat. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. But where could I go? To the church? The same places I had mocked and defiled? Would they even let me in? I had no choice. 2 days later, I walked into a church for the first time in decades. People turned to look at me, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. They knew who I was. The pastor, an older man with kind eyes, approached cautiously. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat locked. My entire body trembled. I had stood in satanic temples. I had performed rituals in ancient cathedrals. I had spat on the name of Jesus countless times. And now I was terrified to be here. Tears burned my eyes. My knees buckled. I collapsed. And then the words came. The only words I had left. I don't want to go back. The pastor knelt beside me, his voice steady. You don't have to. I broke. Years of lies, deception, fear, it all came crashing down. I sobbed, right there on the floor of the church in front of everyone. And for the first time in my life, I prayed, not to Lucifer, not to the spirits, to Jesus, and I knew he had already been waiting. I thought walking into that church was the hardest thing I would ever do. I was wrong. Leaving my old life behind wasn't just a decision, it was a war. At first, I kept quiet. I told myself I needed time to process, to understand. But the more I stayed silent, the more restless I became. I had seen too much, I knew too much, and I couldn't pretend anymore. So I spoke. I started small, just a conversation with the pastor, then a few others from the church. Their reactions were mixed. Some were stunned. Others skeptical. A few were afraid of me. I couldn't blame them. I had spent years leading people away from Christ. Now I was claiming he had saved me. Why would anyone believe me? But I didn't stop. One night I sat in front of a camera, took a deep breath and hit record. I told my story. I told them about the rituals, the pacts, the deception. I told them about hell, Lucifer, the demons I thought were my allies. I told them about the moment. Jesus appeared, how his presence shattered everything I believed. And then I told them the truth. Satan doesn't care about his followers. He only cares about their destruction. I expected backlash. I expected mockery. But what I didn't expect was how many people already knew. Within hours, messages flooded my inbox. People from all over the world. Some told me I was insane, that I was lying, that I was just looking for attention. But others, they told me they had seen it too. Ex-witches, ex-occultists, people who had dabbled in the darkness and barely escaped. I wasn't alone, but neither were they. Some of the messages sent a chill down my spine. You should have stayed quiet. They won't let you keep talking. Watch your back. At first I thought it was just internet trolls. Then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. You're making a mistake, Damien. The line went dead. That night the nightmares came back, but this time they were different. Darker, more vivid. Lucifer's face, grinning. The demons, watching, waiting, and then in the distance, footsteps. I woke up to the sound of something scraping against my window. I was on the second floor. A deep chill ran through me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. Silence. Then 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, right against the glass. I closed my eyes and whispered the only name that could protect me. Jesus. Instantly the presence vanished. The air shifted. The darkness fled. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I'd spent years serving the enemy. Did I really think he would let me go so easily? The next morning I packed my bags and left the city.